I came out of the Middlesex Schools Orchestra with perfect pitch, and then went into a band that tuned to a harmonica, and it drove me crazy for years. I mean, I always felt that we sounded out of tune. Eventually, it disappeared. You know, it was forced out. And now if you told me to sing an A, I'd go, A.
Well, as you might have guessed, this week we're going to be talking about tuning.
Tuning is a problem that every band has to face. It concerns every instrument, not least the drums. The drums have a very wide range of pitches.
But first, we're going to start looking at the guitar and bass. And the vital components with tuning of these instruments are the strings.
Now, string pitch is determined by the length of the string, by the thickness of the string, and also by the tension. Now, on guitar and on bass, the length of the string is predetermined. It doesn't alter. So the only variables are the thickness and the tension.
So, the thicker the string, the lower the pitch. On the guitar, the thickest, heaviest string gives you the lowest note, like this. And the lightest, thinnest string gives you the highest note, like this. Now, the thickness or the diameter of the strings is usually referred to as the gauge, and you buy your strings in sets. Now, whether you use a heavy set or a light set of strings will depend on your personal choice and the kind of role that you play in the band.
The strings I use are, I think, a little heavier than most people use. And I like the action high-ish. You see, I don't go for playing 6 million notes really fast or anything, so I don't want the action right down. It's more for the sound. The gauge of strings you use should be really the heaviest you can manage to do what you want to do with, because the heavier a string is, the better the sound you're going to get from it. It gives a louder and a truer note if it's a tighter, heavier string.
So, as Wilko says, a heavier gauge of strings will give you a louder, truer note. You'll find you'll get a bit more sustain and they'll stay in tune a bit longer. The advantage of a lighter gauge is that vibrato and string bending will be a lot easier. So really, you've got to make the choice.
You can get different gauges of bass strings too, but bass players are more concerned with the type of string they use. Now, all bass strings are wound, but the difference is basically in the binding. There are 3 types. There's round wound, flat wound, and ground wound. For round wound strings, there's a central plain core which has rounded wire wrapped around it. They give a bright sound and a touch more sustain. Flat wound strings have the same plain core but with a flat metal tape wrapped around it. They give you a punchier, more middly tone. Ground wounds are a combination of the two, being round wound strings shaved down and polished to make them feel like flat wounds. We went out and asked a few bass players what sort of strings they preferred and why.
I used to use flat wound strings when I started off with Whitesnake because the middliness of them really poked through. They're very hard to play, so I sort of gave that a rest and found a compromise with more ground wound strings, which are like round wounds that have been shaved down a bit. So they don't have so much twang on the top, but they still got a fairly middly sound.
The round wounds, rough boys, you know, make you have to scuffle for it, you know. And you know, I don't know. It seems like they have a better tone. I don't know if they last too long, but you know, I mean, as far as the sound and roughness and you know, I like you know that kind of thing. You know, they get a real good sound out of it, especially on stage too, and in the studio.
I used flat wound on the first 2 albums, but after that I changed. Especially for the slapping sound, you get more. You know, you get a better sound, you get a more crisp sound, more pop, you know, when you're doing this type of stuff. You know, you get a better tone with a flat, you know, with the flat wound, you get something like this. And it's not really as clear, you know. I really can't demonstrate it without having the actual strings here. But you like to have that you know, that pop there, that crisp sound like.
Drums have different voices too. by recognising these different voices, you can copy licks off records and work out different patterns and so on. We'll be looking at this throughout the series. And in recent years, drummers have had access to more exotic sounds, like these rototoms. Or this timbali. Or even these syndromes. Now, to get the best out of the main kit requires very careful tuning. In fact, tensioning is probably a more accurate term, since most drummers don't tune to specific notes. So, when drummers talk about tuning, generally they're talking about the overall feel and sound of the drum when it's struck.
All you can say is when the drum pleases you when you hit it, it's in tune, because nobody can tell you a drum is out of tune. If the drum is fighting with itself, so that if you've got a two-head drum and the skins are actually mismatching, then you can tell that's out of tune. But whether you tune it high or you tune it slack, you know, if it's in tune and it sounds good to your ear, then don't ask for anything more. So just say how you tune it. What my preference is, I tune my snare drum very high. I like it to be sharp and positive, and I don't like a lot of duration on the note. The toms I like exactly the reverse. I like them deep, and I like an after note. So when you hit the drum, you get the initial tension of the impact, and then you get the roll-off as the skin relaxes and comes back to its normal tension.
Another factor is the type of stick that you use. This is entirely personal preference and, of course, the type of music you're playing. Sticks are usually made out of wood. Hickory and oak are the commonest. And when you're choosing a stick, especially if you're having to buy cheapish ones, always roll it on the counter like this, on the horizontal counter of the shop. If it's warped at all, you'll soon notice. Now, again, when we went out and asked some famous drummers about their stick preferences, we got some really revealing answers.
I'm not very fussy about drumsticks. So long as they're the right length, and for generally for mats about 16 inches for me, and the right diameter, which I think is about 9/16 or 5/8, 9/16 I think, and the weight is right. I don't actually care what shape they are. In this situation, I'm using the sticks as they should be used, bead end out. On stage, I may say it's totally the reverse thing. Right? All I really need on stage is absolute power, and this probably gives me another 20 dB.
I find that this particular part here, the neck of the stick, is one of the most important parts, because this bit here, I don't like to have any gain, any whip or any movement there. And a lot of drums, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but that doesn't really move that much. And a lot of drumsticks you buy give a little there. When they give, they actually sound different. But this here is a little bit thicker than norm, and it feels very positive. I mean, when I play, I can feel down the drumstick as a continuation of my arm, and it feels real good.
Well, I use this Duraline 605. The Duraline is in my left hand, and I use it as a regal tip combo in the right hand. Two different sticks, two different sizes.
Why?
Because, for instance, you're playing like this, right? This part of the stick is much heavier, this part is lighter, right? So it's unbalanced. So what I do, I use a smaller stick, right? The combo is much smaller than this. This combo is almost the size of here, so I have the two end being the same. And what I do is put some tape like this around here to balance back this end and cut off some of the notes of the hi-hat. So when you're playing, instead you get it, you don't get it. So it's sort of glide with the music. And you have much more control over the hi-hat.